In the tapestry of history, there are moments when the world stands on the brink of unprecedented change, where the decisions of a few can alter the course of humanity. Welcome to Ultra Prime Selections, Inc., where we uncover the untold stories, dissect the hidden truths, and bring you face to face with the realities of power, conflict, and human ambition. The origins of World War III provide such a moment, a confluence of geopolitical tensions, territorial disputes, and the resurgence of authoritarian regimes that would plunge the globe into chaos. The stage was set long before the first shots were fired. Decades of simmering tensions, fueled by the remnants of the Cold War, had been building quietly beneath the surface of international relations. The world had become a chessboard of power, where every move was calculated, every alliance scrutinized, and every threat magnified by the specter of past conflicts. At the heart of these tensions lay the Second Cold War, marked by intense rivalry and suspicion between the world's superpowers. Unlike its predecessor, this new Cold War was not defined by a single ideological struggle, but by a complex web of economic, technological, and military competitions. Territorial disputes further exacerbated these tensions. In Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and the South China Sea, borders became flashpoints for conflict. Nations, emboldened by nationalist fervor and the promise of economic gain, began to challenge the status quo, leading to confrontations that tested the limits of diplomacy. As these disputes unfolded, a more insidious force was taking root: the rise of authoritarian regimes. Across the globe, leaders who promised stability and strength in the face of uncertainty gained power. They capitalized on the fears and frustrations of their people, offering simple solutions to complex problems. These regimes, often characterized by their disregard for democratic norms and human rights, pursued aggressive foreign policies that further destabilized the international order. The resurgence of authoritarianism was not limited to any one region. In Russia, China, and Iran, leaders consolidated power, silencing dissent and projecting strength abroad. In Europe, the specter of authoritarianism reemerged in countries grappling with economic hardship and social unrest. These regimes, united by their disdain for Western liberalism, found common cause in opposing the established global order. As these forces converged, the world found itself on the brink of a conflict that would draw in the major powers. The alliances that had once served as a bulwark against war now seemed fragile and outdated, unable to contain the ambitions of nations driven by a desire for power and influence. The seeds of World War III were thus sown in the fertile ground of geopolitical ambition and ideological division. It was a conflict born not of necessity, but of choice. A choice made by leaders who believed that war was the only path to achieving their goals. In this volatile environment, overthinking became both a curse and a necessity. Leaders and strategists, aware of the stakes, found themselves trapped in a cycle of analysis and indecision. Every decision was weighed against countless variables, each with the potential to tip the scales toward peace or war. Yet, as history would show, the complexities of global conflict often defy even the most careful planning. The very act of overthinking, of considering every possible outcome, can lead to paralysis, allowing events to spiral out of control. In the end, it was this very human tendency to overanalyze and second-guess that contributed to the outbreak of a war that would change the world forever. As we delve deeper into this fictional narrative, it is important to remember that the origins of World War III are not just a story of political maneuvering and military might. They are a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the fragility of peace, and the critical importance of thoughtful, measured decision-making in the face of uncertainty. The lessons of this imagined conflict resonate with us today as we navigate a world that is increasingly interconnected yet fraught with tension. They remind us that while history may not repeat itself, it often rhymes, and that the choices we make now will shape the future for generations to come. In the following segments, we will explore how these origins set the stage for a conflict that would engulf the world, examining the alliances that formed, the humanitarian crises that ensued, and the eventual resolution that reshaped the global landscape. But for now, let us pause and reflect on the origins of World War III, a moment in time where the seeds of conflict were sown and the world was forever changed. As the world stood on the brink of unprecedented conflict, the global landscape was rapidly transforming. Nations, driven by a mix of fear, ambition, and survival instincts, began to coalesce into formidable alliances. This segment delves into the intricate web of alliances that set the stage for the unfolding drama of World War III. At the heart of this geopolitical chessboard were two dominant factions, the Allies and the revisionist powers. The Allies, a coalition of Western democracies, included nations like the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, along with their strategic partners across Europe and Asia. These countries, bound by shared values and mutual defense agreements, sought to preserve a world order based on democratic principles and international cooperation. Opposing them stood the revisionist powers, a formidable bloc led by authoritarian regimes such as Russia, China, and Iran. These nations, often at odds with Western ideals, shared a common goal of reshaping the global order to better suit their strategic interests. Under the leadership of these powerful states, the revisionist powers aimed to expand their influence and challenge the dominance of Western democracies. The formation of these alliances was not merely a matter of convenience or shared ideology. It was a strategic necessity in a world teetering on the brink of war. Each side, aware of the other's strengths and weaknesses, engaged in a complex dance of diplomacy, espionage, and military posturing. The stakes were high, and the potential consequences of miscalculation were catastrophic. As these alliances took shape, the world witnessed a series of diplomatic maneuvers and strategic realignments. Countries that had long maintained neutrality found themselves drawn into the orbit of one of the two major factions. Smaller nations, caught in the crossfire of global power struggles, were forced to choose sides, often at the expense of their sovereignty and stability. The diverging agendas and strategies of these alliances added another layer of complexity to the conflict. The Allies, while united in their commitment to defending democratic values, faced internal disagreements over military strategies and resource allocation. The revisionist powers, on the other hand, grappled with the challenge of maintaining cohesion among diverse member states with differing priorities and ambitions. As the alliances solidified, the world braced itself for a conflict of unprecedented scale and complexity. The intricate tapestry of alliances, with its myriad of interwoven threads, set the stage for a protracted and devastating war. The decisions made by these alliances, shaped by the interplay of overthinking and strategic calculation, would have far-reaching consequences for the course of history. In this speculative narrative, we see how the alliances of World War III were not just about military might or political power. They were a reflection of deeper ideological divides and the relentless pursuit of national interests. As we continue to explore this fictional conflict, we are reminded of the delicate balance that exists in the real world, where alliances can both prevent and precipitate global crises. The story of these alliances serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the importance of thoughtful diplomacy and the dangers of overthinking in international relations. As we delve deeper into the unfolding events of World War III, we invite you to reflect on the complex interplay of factors that drive nations to war and the critical role of alliances in shaping the outcome of global conflicts. In the throes of World War III, the world bore witness to the unfathomable depths of human suffering. As the relentless gears of war ground on, it was not just the soldiers on the front lines who paid the price. The true victims were often the innocents caught in the crossfire, their lives irrevocably altered by the chaos that unfolded around them. The humanitarian crises that arose during this conflict were catastrophic in scale and impact. Entire cities, once vibrant and full of life, were reduced to ghost towns, their streets echoing with the silence of abandonment. Families were torn apart, their members scattered across continents in search of safety. For many, the journey to refuge was fraught with peril, a desperate bid for survival amidst the backdrop of an unyielding war. Genocides, once whispered fears, became grim realities. Ethnic and religious tensions, inflamed by the war, erupted into violence, leaving countless communities devastated. The world watched in horror as these acts of brutality unfolded, a chilling reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty. Mass displacements became the norm, with millions forced to flee their homes. The refugee camps that sprang up in response were overwhelmed, struggling to provide even the most basic necessities. In these makeshift shelters, hope was a rare commodity, overshadowed by the daily struggle for food, water, and safety. As the conflict raged on, the suffering among civilians was widespread and relentless. The psychological scars of war ran deep, affecting not only those who lived through it, but also future generations. The trauma of loss, the fear of violence, and the uncertainty of tomorrow became ingrained in the collective consciousness of those who survived. In this dark chapter of human history, the world was forced to confront the harsh realities of war. The humanitarian impact of World War III was a stark illustration of the consequences of unchecked aggression and the failure of diplomacy. It served as a sobering reminder of the fragility of peace and the dire need for compassion and understanding in times of conflict. Yet amidst the despair, there were glimmers of resilience. Communities banded together, offering support to those in need. Humanitarian organizations worked tirelessly to provide aid, their efforts a beacon of hope in a landscape of devastation. These acts of kindness, though small in the grand scheme of the war, were powerful testaments to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The toll of World War III on humanity was incalculable, its legacy etched into the annals of history. As we reflect on this fictional narrative, we are reminded of the critical importance of empathy and diplomacy in averting such tragedies in reality. It is a call to action for all of us to strive for a world where peace prevails over conflict and where the lessons of the past guide us toward a more compassionate future. The specter of nuclear warfare loomed large over the unfolding global conflict, an ominous escalation that promised unparalleled destruction. As tensions reached a fever pitch, both sides, in a desperate bid to secure victory, turned to the most devastating weaponry known to humanity. The decision to resort to nuclear arms was not made lightly. It was the culmination of a series of strategic miscalculations, fueled by the overthinking of military and political leaders who found themselves trapped in a cycle of fear and retaliation. The first strikes were swift and merciless, targeting major cities and strategic military installations. The immediate impact was catastrophic, with millions perishing in the initial blasts. The world watched in horror as iconic skylines were reduced to ashes and once thriving metropolises became desolate wastelands. The sheer scale of destruction defied comprehension, a stark reminder of the terrifying power wielded by those who had misjudged the gravity of their decisions. Yet the immediate casualties were only the beginning of a much larger tragedy. The fallout from these attacks unleashed a new and insidious threat: radiation. Invisible and indiscriminate, it seeped into the environment, contaminating air, water, and soil. Survivors of the initial blasts found themselves grappling with a new reality, where the very act of breathing could prove fatal. Cities once bustling with life became ghost towns, their inhabitants fleeing in search of refuge from the invisible menace. As the days turned into weeks, the long-term consequences of radiation exposure began to manifest. Illnesses proliferated, with cancer rates skyrocketing and birth defects becoming tragically common. The healthcare systems, already overwhelmed by the sheer number of injured and displaced, buckled under the pressure, unable to cope with the burgeoning crisis. The psychological toll was equally profound, as survivors struggled to come to terms with the loss of loved ones and the annihilation of their communities. Beyond the immediate human cost, the environmental impact was equally devastating. Vast tracts of land were rendered uninhabitable, their ecosystems irreparably damaged. The delicate balance of nature was disrupted, leading to the extinction of countless species and the collapse of food chains. The long-term ecological consequences were incalculable, with scientists warning of a nuclear winter scenario where the soot and debris from the explosions would block sunlight, leading to global cooling and widespread crop failures. In the corridors of power, the realization of the full extent of the devastation began to sink in. Leaders on both sides faced mounting pressure from their citizens, who demanded an end to the senseless destruction. The initial bravado that had driven the decision to escalate to nuclear warfare gave way to a sobering recognition of the catastrophic consequences. Overthinking, which had led to paralysis and indecision in the face of mounting threats, now gave way to a desperate search for solutions. Diplomatic channels, long dormant, were suddenly thrust into overdrive as both sides sought a way to de-escalate the conflict. Negotiations were fraught with tension, as each side grappled with the realization that any further misstep could spell the end of civilization as they knew it. The specter of mutual annihilation loomed large, a grim reminder of the stakes involved. As the world teetered on the brink of destruction, a fragile ceasefire was brokered. The immediate threat of further nuclear exchanges was averted, but the scars of the conflict would take generations to heal. The long-term effects of radiation continued to cast a shadow over the future, a constant reminder of the folly of overthinking and the dire consequences of unchecked escalation. In the aftermath, the global community was left to grapple with the lessons of this harrowing chapter in human history. The need for restraint and diplomacy became more urgent than ever as nations sought to rebuild and forge a new path forward. The specter of nuclear warfare, once a distant nightmare, had become a stark reality, a testament to the destructive potential of human ingenuity when wielded without foresight. The narrative of World War III, marked by its descent into nuclear chaos, serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of thoughtful decision-making. As the world emerged from the ashes, the hope was that the lessons learned would prevent such a catastrophe from ever occurring again. The story of nuclear warfare, with its devastating casualties and enduring consequences, stands as a cautionary tale, urging humanity to choose a path of peace and cooperation over one of conflict and destruction. As the world reeled from the devastation of World War III, the tides of change began to sweep across the globe. The war, which had brought unparalleled destruction and suffering, finally concluded with an armistice. This ceasefire was not merely a pause in hostilities, but a turning point that marked the dawn of a new geopolitical landscape. The armistice itself was a product of arduous negotiations, driven by the sheer exhaustion of the warring nations and the undeniable need for peace. Leaders from both sides, recognizing the futility of further conflict, came together in a historic summit. The discussions were fraught with tension, as each nation sought to protect its interests while simultaneously acknowledging the need for compromise. Territorial changes were among the most significant outcomes of these negotiations. Borders were redrawn, reflecting the new balance of power. Some nations found themselves with expanded territories, while others faced the loss of lands they had long considered integral to their identity. These changes were not without controversy, sparking debates and protests in various regions. In the aftermath of the war, new alliances began to form, reshaping the global order. The old alliances that had defined the conflict dissolved, as nations sought to forge new partnerships based on mutual interests and shared visions for the future. The rise of these new alliances signaled a shift in the global power dynamics, with emerging powers taking on more prominent roles on the world stage. Simultaneously, several regimes that had been dominant during the war found themselves crumbling under the weight of their own internal contradictions. The fall of these regimes was often abrupt, as the pressures of war and the demands for change from their populations proved too great to withstand. The establishment of new geopolitical realities was not limited to political changes. Economically, the world had to adapt to the massive disruptions caused by the war. Trade routes had been severed, industries destroyed, and economies left in tatters. The task of rebuilding was monumental, requiring cooperation and innovation on an unprecedented scale. Socially, the war had left deep scars on the fabric of societies worldwide. The collective trauma of the conflict, coupled with the loss of millions of lives, necessitated a period of healing and reconciliation. The environmental impact of the war was another challenge to be addressed. The use of nuclear weapons had left vast areas contaminated with radiation, posing long-term health risks to populations and devastating ecosystems. Efforts to mitigate these effects became a priority as nations collaborated to clean up and restore affected regions. As the dust settled, the world stood at the threshold of a new era. The lessons of the war were clear, the costs of conflict were too high, and the pursuit of peace and diplomacy was paramount. The specter of overthinking, which had played a role in the escalation of tensions, served as a cautionary tale. It highlighted the dangers of becoming trapped in cycles of indecision and paranoia, where fear and suspicion overshadowed reason and dialogue. In this new world order, there was a renewed emphasis on international cooperation and the importance of addressing global challenges collectively. The conclusion of World War III was not just an end, but a beginning, a chance to rebuild, to learn from past mistakes, and to create a future defined by peace and understanding. The path forward was fraught with challenges, but it was also filled with possibilities. As humanity embarked on this new journey, the hope was that the lessons of the past would guide the way to a more harmonious and prosperous world. As we reach the conclusion of our exploration into the speculative narrative of World War III, it's essential to pause and reflect on the intricate dance of decision-making that unfolded throughout this fictional conflict. At the heart of this story lies the profound impact of overthinking, a mental process that, while often seen as a hallmark of caution and thoroughness, can also lead to paralysis and unintended consequences. In our narrative, the leaders of global powers found themselves entangled in a web of overanalysis, where every decision was weighed against countless variables, potential outcomes, and perceived threats. This constant churn of thoughts and possibilities, rather than providing clarity, often led to confusion and hesitation. It was a stark reminder of how overthinking can cloud judgment, impede decisive action, and ultimately contribute to catastrophic outcomes. The fictional World War III serves as a powerful allegory for the real-world challenges faced by decision-makers at all levels. It highlights the delicate balance between thoughtful consideration and the need for timely action. In the realm of global conflict and diplomacy, where stakes are unimaginably high, the ability to make informed yet swift decisions is paramount. Throughout the course of this narrative, we observed how overthinking influenced critical junctures, from the formation of alliances to the escalation of military strategies, and ultimately to the devastating use of nuclear weapons. Each step in this fictional journey was marked by a relentless pursuit of certainty, a desire to predict and control every variable, which ironically led to greater uncertainty and chaos. As we ponder the lessons from this speculative scenario, it becomes evident that the art of decision-making requires not only intelligence and foresight, but also the courage to act amidst ambiguity. It calls for an understanding that perfection in decision-making is an illusion, and that sometimes the most prudent course is to embrace imperfection and move forward with resolve. The narrative also underscores the critical role of diplomacy as a counterbalance to overthinking. Diplomacy, with its emphasis on dialogue, negotiation, and compromise, offers a pathway to navigate the complexities of international relations without resorting to conflict. It is a reminder that while overthinking may paralyze, diplomacy can facilitate progress and peace. In reflecting on this fictional account, we are invited to consider how these themes resonate with our own lives and the world around us. The challenges of global conflict, whether real or imagined, demand a thoughtful approach to decision-making, one that values clarity over complexity, action over inaction, and diplomacy over aggression. As we close this chapter, let us carry forward the insights gained from this narrative. Let us strive to temper our tendency to overthink with a commitment to decisive action and a dedication to diplomacy. This fictional exploration of World War III may be an imaginative exercise, but the lessons it imparts are profoundly real. They serve as a call to action for all of us, to reflect on the implications of our decisions, to prioritize diplomacy, and to work towards a future where overthinking does not dictate the course of history, but rather where thoughtful decision-making paves the way for peace and progress. As the world emerges from the ashes, we are left with a haunting truth. War is never just about weapons and borders. It is about choices, ambitions, and the fragile nature of peace. At Ultra Prime Selections, Inc., we delve beyond the headlines, exposing the forces shaping our world, because understanding the past is the key to securing the future. Subscribe now and stay informed, because the next chapter of history is being written right now.